I'm going to be joined now by one of my favourite people, James Price, former Chief of Staff and Senior Special Advisor to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Mr. Price, how are you this morning?
I hadn't realised that it was Friday the 13th until you said so. I'm now going to be paranoid all day long, but other than that, I'm well.
Good, don't you? No walking under ladders, get yourself a black cat, all of that business. Prince Andrew. I mean, the man is just the most pig-headed, arrogant, naive, thick, pompous, self-righteous, self-important buffoon this country's ever been cursed with. It doesn't surprise me at all, this story. The Chinese spy, the man who... I mean, when you start reading the details of all of this, you know, the fact that this guy had some sort of letter from Prince Andrew's Chief of Staff saying, oh, you're very special, you're in a very privileged position, oh, we know how to get other advisors who don't do as we like out of the way, but you represent the prince in all that he cares to do. And you just think he's dictated that himself, hasn't he? It's an embarrassment. But not only is it embarrassment, surely it is a huge security risk.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we can take some small comfort in the fact that it is unlikely that this person is the worst person with whom Prince Andrew has socialised or spent some time, if certain news stories across the pond are to be in any way countenanced. Prince Andrew does not have a great track record of fine judgment on these things, unfortunately. Maybe that's why the Lord in his infinite wisdom did not make him the eldest son of her late majesty. But I think the broader, wider point here is the fact that we have an increasingly dangerous world, and Britain has, because of the freedoms that we're supposed to enjoy, not quite sure how much we're actually getting to enjoy them at the moment, but because of our society and culture of freedoms, we are hated by people around the world. We are mistrusted and loathed by, for example, in this case, the Chinese Communist Party. China is probably the biggest threat that the West has or will maybe even ever face on this planet. And we don't seem to be alive to the huge danger that it poses. Look at the amount of money that they spend in universities and in other areas trying to weed their way in. Look at the fact that in most of these phones that people have got, you can download something like TikTok, which is a Chinese app. It's basically crack cocaine for people. It's very, very addictive. I think it's turning people's brains to mush. And that's before you realize the fact that when you spend a significant amount of time on it, all the studies show that you end up with a more positive view overall of China and the Chinese Communist Party. So it's basically a super spy weapon in our pockets, let alone the fact that there's a super spy hanging out with one of our dukes or princes.
Yeah, and someone who definitely probably has a bit of compromat knocking about, one would assume.
You may think.
But, I mean, you know, what I would say is this, let's play a bit of devil's advocate, is I'm sure that we all do this to some degree, you know, as part of statecraft. We have people who lobby on behalf of our own national interests. We have people whose job it is to go out and make diplomatic connections and build networks. So if there's a particular person who is sort of, you know, helping Prince Andrew handle his business, I mean, surely that should be allowed.
It's a valiant effort, Alex, to play devil's advocate.
I tried.
I think you did. I think not. I think that, again, the reason, the way that the Chinese Communist Party is so particularly insidious is that the state in China controls all of these business elements, as well as it being, you know, they've got all the spy agencies, they've got obviously the People's Liberation Army, one of the biggest and scariest armies in the world. The fact is that they're very happy to use their kind of state muscle and all the apparatus around it to also inveigle their way into business life, into the corporate world. So, you know, America in particular these days will come up with all kinds of fabulous new inventions and new technologies and things. Europe is being left far behind on that, and we need to catch up, a whole other story. The Chinese will come along and nick all of it. That kind of corporate espionage is very, very popular. I've talked just about the kind of the tech scene in terms of in our pockets, broadly in our kind of cultural sector as well. How many people are being paid and funded to say nice China cuddly things across a whole range of areas, and now it seems they're trying to infiltrate the royal family as well. We need to be alive to this threat. This is not something that's going to go away. And I think that Prince Andrew isn't alone in thinking that maybe he's smart enough to handle these sorts of things, or that he's able to get around it. You've seen some footage there of Keir Starmer trying to cuddle up to China as we hand away territory to their allies. But also you've got lots of businessmen who do a lot of business in China, lots of money to be made there, very happy to turn a blind eye to the concentration camps of Uyghur Muslims out in the west of China, very happy to ignore the horrendous kind of civil liberties abuses there in order to make a quick buck. The time is coming when those supply chains will end as tensions ramp up, and a lot of people will be made very rich, but hopefully feel very ashamed of themselves for engaging with an evil totalitarian regime.
I mean, the first sort of order of business for this Labour government was to go over and hang out with old Xi. But if I was China, do you know what I would do? I'd think I want to persuade Britain to go hell for leather for this whole net zero stuff, because we're not going to follow the rules. We're going to use a load of coal-fired power stations to then actually make the solar panels and the wind turbines that little Britain's going to come and buy from us. We make a load of money, and guess what? When the wind doesn't blow, we don't have energy, and our manufacturing goes to hell in a handcart. I mean, that's perfect if you're China, isn't it? And yet here we are. This is what we're doing. And Ed Miliband has been warned that this sort of almost, student ideology obsession with targets and getting to net zero, and we must save the world by 2030, when actually if Trump does what Trump says he's going to do, which means he's probably going to do it, is going to mean that any efforts we make to reach net zero, most of the world make to reach net zero, have net zero impact. And yet he's been told this is going to lead to higher bills, it's going to risk millions of jobs, and he sits there with his congested nose constantly telling us that it's exciting, this is brilliant, the green revolution, Britain's going to lead the way, yay. And I just think, is he going to be the first energy secretary in the modern era to preside over blackouts?
It's a very good question. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's so many ways we can go in this because it's so mad. We could go down the route of pointing out our old buddies there. We've just talked about China opening still very many new coal-powered plants all the time. Supposed allies in Germany, because they're so controlled by the mad Green Party there, who it's come out in the last few weeks, used government, because they're part of the government, they use government resources to lie and make up facts about nuclear power that aren't true, that got Germany to shut all of its nuclear power stations, to the point that Germany is now having to open new coal power plants as well. But you can look here, I actually got this ready. These are the numbers of our electricity mix in Britain. And this isn't 6 a.m, this is 2 p.m. yesterday. And I know we're in the middle of winter, but that's when it's obviously going to be most acute. We got almost 2/3 of our energy in the UK from gas.
Gas, woo!
Like almost 10% from biomass. In lots of cases, that means big trees chopped down in Canada or North America and carted across the Atlantic, obviously at great carbon usage there, to bring over to factories in the UK to be burned. Less than 10% nuclear. And even though it was a miserable day yesterday, 3.8% of our energy was generated by wind, 0.7% solar, and then 7% and a bit storage, and imports, and hardly any storage. This means the idea that we could get to net zero anytime soon without seeing catastrophic changes to our way of life is clearly for the birds. The birds, incidentally, they get killed by all of
the wind turbines. Well, this is it. With those statistics, 69% relying on fossil fuels as of 9:35 this morning, so that's still going on. With those statistics, given that we've also, well, not we, he, the idiots, the nasal idiots, has also banned new licences for drilling oil and gas in the North Sea, I mean, unless we go cap in hand to the sort of petro economies that he hates so much, we've got to buy energy from dictators, we're not going to be able to turn the lights on. I'm going to be sitting here broadcasting with a megaphone from the roof of Talk Towers. I mean, it is a nonsense. I don't see how this can happen. The infrastructure is not going to be built quickly enough. There's no evidence that we can afford to pay for it without it going on our energy bills. We know he's already spent about £9 billion on some of his more madcap schemes, GB Energy and all the rest of it, meaning that we're being taxed to the hilt, which is why the UK economy has shrunk again in October, according to official figures. Slow round of applause to Rachel Reeves as well, thieving idiot. If anyone could come up with a blueprint of how to destroy a country's productivity and prosperity, this is it.
Is it Robert Conquest's third law of politics? The best way to understand the actions of any organisation is to assume it's run by a cabal of its enemies. And that certainly feels about right for some of these decisions you say. there are reasons to be hopeful in some cases. The fact that this whole net zero energy stuff is so alive at the moment means that some of the smartest people out there in the world, and blokes in their sheds as well, are tinkering away trying to come up with solutions for it. And I've got a lot more confidence in those sorts of people than I do in any attempt to try and get us to reduce emissions and change our way of life. All these people saying, you're going to have to eat bugs instead of cows and all this kind of nonsense. You're never going to be allowed to take a cheap flight ever again. People are going to ignore that. And we saw that in COVID, when everything kind of got shut down, it didn't make that much of a dent in emissions anyway then either. So I've got a lot more faith in Elon Musk or somebody like that coming up with lots of clever tech solutions that's going to give us huge amounts of clean, either cheap or even perhaps one day free energy. I'm very bullish on the idea that solar is going to get better and better. If we do a lot more nuclear and exciting next generation nuclear stuff, that's going to be better. And I think the reason I'm possibly so positive about this is we hear about all these other exciting technologies, things like artificial intelligence and all this clever stuff. That stuff is going to require huge amounts of energy to be generated in order to power it. So some of the smartest bods out there are going, right, we haven't got enough energy as things stand. We definitely haven't got enough for all the cool stuff I want to build. I'm going to have to go and start building nuclear plants myself. So you're going to see the Mark Zuckerberg nuclear power plant, the Elon Musk power plant, all of these kinds of things. And when that kind of technology gets going, that's going to mean we don't have to start worrying about Greta Thunberg and telling us to go and poo in a bucket as we sail across the ocean in a little wind boat. We're going to have all kinds of exciting technologies that are going to save the planet and make us richer.
Oh, she doesn't care about the climate anymore. She just cares about the terrorists, poor things.
Oh, that's right.
She loves the terrorist. But I mean, it is a madness. But you are right. We are actually world leaders when it comes to developing hydrogen power. We're in that race. Let's hope we win it. And frankly, we should have won the race to small modular reactors already because Rolls-Royce basically has that technology. Sign the memorandum of understanding, Ed Miliband. Let's get these things put up in the country. Now, on equally dismal news, it turns out that train cancellations have hit a record high as a result of giving extra money to the drivers. I just can't fathom this. Performance has hit record-breaking lows across the entire country in the 3 months from July, when the general election took place. So apparently we had to give all this extra pay, £135 million worth of pay increases, to stop the strikes and improve train services. But guess what? They don't want to do overtime anymore because they're quite happy with their pay and they'd rather sit at home. And as a result, we've got train cancellations left, right and centre.
It's very simple. In whose interests does the Labour Party control the government and run Britain? It's not the people that voted for them. It's not the people that live and work and struggle in the country. It's the trade union bosses, right? It was always this way. This is what happened up through the 1970s in particular, where everything stopped working. What was the old question? Who governs Britain? And nowadays, it's kind of faceless bureaucrats empowered by the Labour Party, but it's still to some extent the trade unions. And we just talked about the exciting prospect of cool new technologies to help solve the intractable problems of today. Well, again, I mentioned Elon Musk. This is a man who's creating driverless cars. You can go to San Francisco now and sit in driverless cars, a company called Waymo, very, very exciting. And pretty soon you're going to be able to hop in one of those things. It will take you and me back to our native Gloucester, where you can do all the easy things you can do on a train. You can get Wi-Fi, you can sit and read a book, you can do some work, all these things without having to pay attention to the road. And the trains will end up emptier and emptier. Or at the very least, let's do what you can do on the Docklands Light Railway out in the east of London, which runs without needing any drivers, right? Robots don't go on strike.
That's true. I mean, they're basically heading for, early redundancy with this sort of behaviour. It's like almost everything that the Labour Party do goes catastrophically wrong. They're utterly hopeless. They're dangerous. Let's also talk about the house building blitz. We're going to build all these new homes. We're just going to create urban sprawl all over the green and pleasant land. The problem is, when you look at the inward migration statistics, which, Keir Starmer might have made his smart little quip about, the Tories did this, didn't they? They let in millions of people. Yes, they did. We also agree that this was a terrible idea. So, Prime Minister, what figure are you going to go for? I'm not going to give an answer to that. The problem is most of these new houses are just going to go to people who have come into the country yesterday. It's not going to help us at all.
No, completely right. And actually worse than that if we're building social housing, that's going to go directly to these people. We're going to pay for those houses to be built. People are not going to pay to live in them if they're new arrivals. And it's going to push up the cost of all the existing remaining housing stock for the rest of us. And as you say, it's going to get to a point where Labour understand, I think, to their credit, to some extent, that the planning system is totally skewed, right? It's way, way more restrictive than basically anywhere else, certainly compared to somewhere like France, where it's a lot easier to build homes. But they're going to break all those laws, not to help young people get on the property ladder for the first time, not to ease the costs of housing, which is horrendously high, but they're going to do it to build social housing for new arrivals. Now, look, if you think that the net increase, so all the people who left the country and all the people who came into the country, of that whole net number overall, what was it last year? Something like 800,000?
Yeah, it's about 750,000 at least. That would be a sort of underestimate, wouldn't it?
Right. And at the same time, we built about 80,000 new houses in the UK. So unless all the new arrivals are living 10 to a house, which I suspect is possibly not quite the case, where do all these people go? Even if they're all William Shakespeare, even if they're all Isaac Newton, which I dare say they're probably not, we haven't got space to put these people. And that's been happening year after year after year, pushing up costs, making it more and more difficult. And what does that do? It means that people who work in productive jobs in the middle of cities have to live further and further away. That makes them less productive, less happy, increases that kind of urban sprawl, and it makes people who live in smaller communities not be able to afford to live there, not least because, of course, now we're also shoving lots and lots of bogus asylum seekers into hotels all across the country and showing no signs of stopping the illegal immigration of tens of thousands of fighting age, predominantly male people coming over in small boats, ditching their passports in the English Channel and pretending that they're children. We're going to fix any of these problems anytime soon? What do your viewers and listeners think?
I think we know what they think, but do you know what? That is a beautiful segue. Thank you ever so much, James Price.